Well, thank you very much for joining me, Habib Anna, from Shelter Afrique. Am I
Shelter
correct?
Afrique.
Shelter Afrique. Okay.
And Habib Anne.
Habib Han. Thank you for correcting me on that. You are here at the IMF World Bank for meetings, and you are part of the private sector as well as part of the African diaspora that have studied here, that have worked in the US, and now you've returned to the continent to leverage the knowledge that you've gained here regarding developments on the continent. So talk about what you're doing and your agenda coming to this annual meeting.
First of all, it's a pleasure to reconnect after so many years.
I know, we go way, 15 years ago when I launched the Africa Bazaar magazine.
So and when I launched
and you were still very young at that period.
I'm still young, I think.
And with a lot of
hair. That's true, that's very true. No, listen, it's a pleasure to see you, and it just tells you how long we've come along, right? And really, for us, it's about our contribution to the continent and our participation in the development of our countries and of Africa in general. And this hasn't started yesterday. Like you said, many years ago, we started networks of African diaspora in the US. We started things like Angel Africa, Network of African Professionals in New York City, and across the US to really foster for change and development across the continent. So we used to organize these forums, investment forums, East Africa Investment Forum, West Africa Investment Forum, Southern, Northern Africa. So the whole idea for us is to keep us connected to the continent, right? Because after many years in the US, you can be very comfortable and just blend in and just live on your life and forget about your roots and where you're coming from. But I think with our networks, the institutions we set up here, like Angel Africa, was to help us keep grounded and keep connected to the continent with the opportunities and everything, right? So because people were doing investment already on the continent from other countries, right? We had a few American institutions, companies investing in Africa. So the question was, when are we going to also take our space on the continent? So since then we managed to do the transition as well. So long story short, today I'm heading a multilateral development bank on the continent called Shelter Afrique Development Bank. So we are based in Nairobi, and we cover 44 countries that are shareholders, and the African Development Bank also is a shareholder, and Africa Re. Those are the two institutional shareholders, Africa Insurance Company. And we were created in 1982 by the African Development Bank, and the whole idea was to create a specialized financial institution, a development bank, that would finance affordable housing and urban infrastructure across the continent. So this is really to address the urban crisis. As you know, following the independence, there was a huge migration from rural to urban. So urbanization rates were really climbing, and nothing was planned to address it. So Shelter Afrique was created to address that. And today we have been undergoing a major transformation. I joined myself last year in January as the CEO of Shelter Afrique, and we transformed it now to a development bank. So in 10 months, last October, we were able to transform the statutes and also the name of the institution from Shelter Afrique to Shelter Afrique Development Bank. So SHAFDB is our new name. And as I said, we have a shareholding of African countries, focusing on the value chain of housing development. So we have four main pillars in our activities. We finance banks in the countries so that the banks can finance developers and mortgage finance developers, that's in our project finance group, and then we finance PPPs, public-private partnership with government agencies, and finally we also are putting in place specialized funds that are basically thematic funds. So we have 7 areas we are looking at. So we're financing housing for women and women working in the housing value chain, so that's gender. We're addressing green climate resilience for housing. And then we are also financing SMEs and trade through banks for housing, construction materials, import-export of goods through trade, and also construction materials manufacturers to really drive the local manufacturing industries in the countries. And then we also have a thematic area on participative financing. This is through Islamic finance products with Middle East. We have a partnership with the Islamic Development Bank to develop sort of rent-to-own sort of products which are very much in line with Islamic finance. And then we're also looking at infrastructure. So as a thematic area for basic infrastructure, this is access to road, electricity, water, sanitation, to make sure that the cost of infrastructure is not reflected on the cost of the home. Otherwise, the houses are not going to be affordable. So we need to have such infrastructure funds that are sort of de-risked, right, and concessional. And then we also have a thematic area for migrants and refugees. So helping those populations to get access to a dignified home, at the same time creating jobs, right, allowing them to work in the value chain of the construction industry. So we want to build up the skills in the different training areas, in the different areas of work. Like we need masons, electricians, plumbers, carpenters in the construction process. So that create jobs for our youth. Instead of having our youth crossing the Mediterranean every day and dying every day, so we can create large-scale housing programs in the different countries where we operate in Africa and upskill the youth and get them to work in those programs and keep them back home. So that's one major challenge that we are pushing on. And then the 7th area or thematic is diaspora. So you and I are all coming out of the diaspora, and we all know how difficult it is to build your home back home.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Like my brothers and sisters from Nigeria will say, you will send money back home, and they will chop the money. And you won't see the house, right? So we at Shelter Afrique Development Bank, we are setting up some platforms to facilitate and help the diaspora own the house. Exactly. Either that or invest in the fund and get some return on investment. So we can create instruments like REITs, Real Estate Investment Trust, through which you can invest in the capital markets and get some return on your investment. But also among us, from the diaspora, you have people that have skills that have been trained maybe in construction companies here in the West, and they can bring those skills back and start companies on the continent and deliver good quality products. So we are looking to be that platform at Shelter Afrique, given our 42 years track record and experience. We can really build a bridge, right, between the diaspora and properties back home. And as we speak, even us at Shelter Afrique, we've been able to finance some of these projects that developers have been struggling to sell. So now we're helping them with the diaspora to connect basically the product they're developing to the diaspora. Every year you have about $95 billion from the diaspora being transferred into Africa. So the idea is, how do we harness this fund and even grow it by delivering quality homes and encouraging the diaspora to invest more in their countries, because everybody needs a home at the end of the day, right? For yourself, for your family, and for your parents back home as well. So that's where we're looking to play a major role, and we're about to sign some agreement actually with the regional stock exchanges in West Africa to help develop housing finance products similar to what we have in this economy here,
in the US.
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and others that are really key to driving home ownership. So we are working towards that, and our goal here is really to connect also with the diaspora that needs homes in their own countries for investment or for home ownership purposes as well.
You know, there's a lot that you covered, a lot that you are also doing on the continent, as you mentioned, over the past 2 or 3 decades when we met, it was the Africa Rising story.
Absolutely.
And you know, many people seized on that opportunity, but very few African in the diaspora, or even African on the continent knew what was going on. And American, even still now, there's still some trepidation regarding investing in Africa because of the story, the narrative surrounding Africa.
Yeah.
So hearing what you're doing is very key to changing that narrative that there are opportunities.
Absolutely.
On the continent. And you recently met with Jamie Dimon, who is in Nairobi and Africa. I mean, it is the top of where we're talking about global banking and American banking. So, and he's looking to open an office in Nairobi.
Absolutely.
He already has one in Nigeria, looking at investment opportunity. Talk about that conversation. Bring us in.
So,
for our audience
yeah.
in the diaspora here, as well as American, they're still like, do I really want to go there? I don't really know anything about Africa.
Listen, you just said it. Jamie Dimon was in Africa last week.
It's still there.
I think he's back now. But we met there, and you know, we reconnected because I used to work for JP Morgan as well, JP Morgan Chase in New York, before moving on to Goldman Sachs. But the whole idea of American banks moving to the continent is very clear, right? The opportunities are there. So, you know, the whole story of Africa Rising, back in the days when you and I still had hair, and much younger and dreaming, the reality is a lot of potential has been talked about, and frankly, some of that potential has been delivered on, right? It's not all blink, right? So I think it's really important to look at the success stories as well, and not just some of those setbacks, right? There have been a few private equity funds that are African owned that have been created since the Africa Rising story. I remember very well. I can cite a few names and some good friends and brothers that were in that whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we know those groups.
Right. So today, I think you know, one of the major advantages of that whole period of the Africa Rising story was also to convince people like us to move on the continent, right? To move to the continent and start something and get involved in the narrative, you know. So that's why I'm here today, visiting the US as an African, and it's a pleasure to be here to reconnect people like you and others. But we need all of us, right, to move the needle on the continent. So I think. This is an ongoing process. Africa will keep rising, okay, beyond the narrative. It's going to be concrete on the ground, and the youth now is even more vigorous than us.
Yeah, when you talk about
others,
technology, right? I mean, we have Facebook, we have Google, we have Microsoft that invest in there, and people are like, why? Because Africa were using mobile payment way before the US or Western world were doing that. So it's really key. I know you have a meeting that you need to get to.
Yes.
So I'm just going to wrap this up and we will do a follow-up.
Thank you very much.
What country, give us a sense of what country you are working with.
Yeah. So today our headquarters are in Nairobi, in Kenya. We have 2 regional offices in West Africa, one in Abidjan and the other one in Abuja in Nigeria. So Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. We are working across the continent, right? So wherever opportunities are, I mean, all countries are shareholders. Some of them are larger shareholders than others, but we still work across the continent. So we are looking at, way we engage with our countries is to a strategic partnership. We help the countries come up with a country housing and urban partnership strategy, and then we implement that to what we call the viral model. Right? So really setting up the vision, institutions, regulations, working with actors and local initiatives to make sure that the agenda is strategic, right? So it's not only about investing in few banks or few developers and projects. It's really addressing the housing deficit. Today you have about 52 million housing deficit in Africa. And if you use a conservative home price, cost of a home of $20,000, you need more than $1 trillion. So $1 trillion is not money you find in the street today, right? It's not going to be easy. Even all the development banks across the continent are very far from that number, right? Including the African Development Bank, right? So it's going to be major. We need to mobilize resources. So we are very pleased that the African Union, at the last African Urban Forum in Addis Ababa a couple of months ago, have appointed or designated Shelter Afrique Development Bank as a resource mobilization anchor institution for urban and housing in Africa. So that's our role, and it's been our role, and it's just very grateful to be reminded and recognized again that this is our mandate, so we're pushing for that. But again, thank you so much for this
Thank you. I know,
opportunity.
I know you have to go, so I don't want you to be late for that meeting.
Thank you so
And
much.
we will definitely follow up either through Zoom or on the phone.
Absolutely.
And it's great to reconnect with you.
And great to see you doing a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you,
Really.
thank you. So do you.